What we're going to be doing is we're going to be building this on a component by component basis. The animation is going to be entirely within After Effects, and the application is going to be outputting a MOV file. You can output a number of video formats with After Effects, Flash video files, H.264, MOV, DVD quality, RAW, whatever you want to call it. All of that can be done. If you look at this, what you see, or what you should be seeing, are two videos in the foreground. They have beveled edges and a drop shadow. There is a video in the background, although it could be an image that is panning slowly. There's a red bar at the top, which is a vector graphic that's been added to it. That kind of overlays the content there. You'll also notice that that red is very similar to the red that's on this guy's jacket, so there's a little bit of color continuity between what we see at the top and the bottom, and what's actually in the video files. There's also, for some reason, a snowstorm with a drop shadow that comes up from the bottom, and obviously that weird-looking flower thingy that comes in from the top. Now, if you look at this in After Effects, you'll see what seems to be a big mess. Over on the side here is where you have your folder and your sources. The project, basically when you're working within After Effects, you have a project file that is a .aep, that is your working file. That is not what you turn in. The AEP is, if you've all used InDesign before, it's like an InDesign document. It's a way of interpreting a set of objects, but it doesn't actually output anything by itself. It needs to be told to process, export a PDF in InDesign's case. With this, there's something called the render queue. If you wanted to send this video to be completed, you'd want to go to file, where are you? Export, and then add to render queue if it weren't grayed out is where it would be going. You get another dialog box at the bottom, and you get to choose the export options. If you wanted to create a new composition, which in After Effects is a subset, think about it this way. You have a clip that exists inside of a composition. If you have a different scene, you have a different composition. If you have another scene, you have another composition. If you have another scene, you have another composition. So you have multiple compositions underneath one project. And then each of those compositions can have different filters applied to it, different content, different videos, you name it. The composition that you're working on shows here. So right now I only have first animation open. If I wanted to create a new composition, I right-click in the project area, give it a name, pick the size and quality that I'm going to be rendering it with. So if you're doing HDTV, you can pick the drop-down for HDTV. If you're doing anything else, there's probably a drop-down for it, or you can just plug in something custom and then drag the pixel dimensions, frame rate, pixel size, etc., according to how you need it. Right now I just want to do something small, so I'm going to do web video 320 by 240. You can see that it pre-populates my pixel dimensions. The pixel aspect ratio is relatively important because the pixels on a television do not look like pixels on a computer. Pixels on a computer usually are square, but pixels on a television are rectangular. They can be a thin or wide ratio. As you can see, if I click this drop down, a square pixel would literally be a square pixel. An NTSC widescreen pixel is 1.21 times wider than a normal pixel. So you get, in the space of 5 pixels, you get, in the space of 1 pixel, you get 1.2 other widescreen pixels. So if I change this around, it's going to change how it appears when you actually output it to an HDTV. But for most web stuff, square pixels is good. 15 frames per second for web online only is good. The standard frame rate for a cinema movie is 24 frames per second. No. Go away. Most camcorders record at 29.97 frames per second, which is pretty standard, but it's not a full progressive scan frame. Most film cameras, I'm using the wrong term. Most camcorders record interlaced, meaning they scan one line of pixels and then they scan the other line of pixels. That's inexpensive, and it keeps the hardware requirements down. To get a full frame scan, they call it progressive, where it scans a full frame at one time. usually higher hardware requirements for that, but you get a better quality photo / image out of it. If you ever pause a video on a VHS player or something like that, and you see somebody moving across it, you're going to see dashes along the hard edge where there shouldn't be dashes. And that's an interlaced effect. We'll go through this and take a look at it, kind of see what exactly it is. But if I was going to finish creating this, I can specify a start time and an end time duration of my project, composition, and I can pick the background color, white, black, red, whatever you want to call it. Say OK, and then you get another composition file in your library here. Now I can choose between the compositions. It's really easy to double click on a composition and forget where you're at. But right now what I want to do is I just want to stick with first animation. We could go through and throw away something just by dragging it to the trash can here. With After Effects, it's really important to know where you are in the application. So if you click on any of these individual windows, they get a yellow outline. That yellow outline just gives you an idea of where the application's focused. If you look at the overall stage, you have your project / library on the left. You can have folders, you can have nested folders, you can have whatever you want. In the middle is your main visual composition. It's essentially where you see things moving around on the page. At the bottom, you have your timeline. Should be very familiar to you if you remember animating in Photoshop. Basically the same concept. Objects that you have in your library, you drag either to the stage or you drag to your timeline. If you drag it to the stage, it adds a new something in there. That something, you can scale the size, animate with keyframes, so on and so forth. So if I wanted to start it here, and then move it slowly over here, you'll see that I got a keyframe, and the box is moving, but it's trying to render as I scrub through this, so it's not looking very sharp. Because there are a lot of pixels that are being processed at any one given time, there is something that After Effects tries to do. It tries to render them live on the fly. If you push the space bar, what should happen is that we'll try to render and then play all of the frames at once. If you look down at the bottom, if you can see my mouse, this little green bar here is what is actually loaded into the memory preview. If there's not any green right there, that means it hasn't rendered it yet, so it doesn't know what it looks like. You can see the frame per second is supposed to be 29.97, but it's actually rendering at 3 frames per second because the machine is choking, basically. Whenever you're working with video, it's really a good idea to have a powerful machine so you're not sitting there rendering for days and days and days on end, which can happen. If you do run into a situation like that, it's usually wise to break it up into pieces. Like render one component, render another component, render another component, and then use an application like Premiere, which is meant for handling video, to tie them all together to an overarching soundtrack or something like that. But you can see there's not enough memory on this machine to be able to support continual playing. As it chugs across here, it has to free up more memory there so that it can continue to render and loop back and forth. Up on the preview dialog box up here, this is where you would set the RAM preview. If you wanted to preview just a smaller portion of this, you can adjust the work area. It doesn't actually adjust the timeline of the movie like this would. All it does is it will render a portion in between there, and you can see it's playing close to, come on, really? It's supposed to be rendering inside of this little spot right here, but it's not. From current time. There we go. If you click the RAM preview button, which is the little 3 lines in the triangle up in the top right under the preview, this is what it'll build a simulation of the actual video clip between these 2 brackets here. These brackets are the play time that you're going to be focusing on. So if you want to focus on only a small part of the project, the work area here, You can scrub this around. You can make it larger or smaller as you need if you have memory issues. So overall, the way that this works, you make adjustments with keyframes. These should be familiar to you with animation in Photoshop or Flash or anything like that. You have info, so as you mouse over you have specific color values. You have audio levels. If you have audio in the animation, you can adjust it here. Your preview, this is where you would play, skip frame by frame by frame by frame, render something in the RAM preview. And of course the effects and presets is where you get all the fun of After Effects in here. There are lots of effects and presets that you can apply to things in After Effects, just like you can in Photoshop. Think Photoshop just with videos. Very similar. There's a whole slew of other options that you can work with, but for now go ahead and start playing around with this file just to see how it's built while I stop this recording.